Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Modern Work Mondays. As always, we have with us our dashing Mr.
Stressor, Microsoft.
Jeff
Morning.
Stresser. I am Nolan Wheeler with Sync, Jeff with Microsoft, and we've got a guest today, Jeff. We've got an expert within the field of accessibility. We stumbled upon Albert with some amazing posts that he was making in terms of in-store shopping accessibility. So perhaps, Albert, do you want to share just very quickly kind of how we all connected and what the experience was like in your observations?
Well, I'm accessibility consultant, but I also a writer and even a poet. And one of the things is that you develop this sense to see the stories everywhere, and sometimes you write about them. So I noticed something very, sad and funny. I made a post in a storytelling approach. It suddenly became viral because you don't really control these things on LinkedIn. You just right time, right place, right first few comments, and then the algorithm decides that this is the viral post. And I remember someone tagged you, no one just tagged, right? For your information, but you reached out to me. You said, well, this story deserves to reach broader circles. So it goes like this. Imagine you walk into a large retail store, multiple stories, aisles stretching long straight lines, stacked high with boxes and bright packaging. Between the shelves, you spot a tall red kiosk with a glowing screen. It's tucked in the corner quite tightly. There is some big merchandise hanging over. The kiosk looks official, looks modern, and right beside the kiosk, you see a life-sized cardboard figure. A smiling employee, one arm raised, like waving to greet you, right? And across its chest, there is also printed in bold letter the message that explains, because there is a printed button with a physical button in the middle. So the text says push button for customer assistance. So it looks cheerful, cut out, looks, something like witty and maybe even budget saving. However, when you look at the same thing with the accessibility lens, or really you try to approach it as a person with disabilities, what do you see? First of all, the corner is so tight you cannot physically get there close to the kiosk on your wheelchair. Just there is no enough width. But let's assume you did. The button is so high. For me, I would need to raise my hand, it's slightly above my head height, which means that, again, there is no way you could even reach for the button from your wheelchair. Now, I have decades of software tester in my career record, so I naturally tested the setup. I pressed the button. Normally, you have some feedback. It's like basics of the user experience of the UI, right? There should be a sound, there should be visual, but no sound, and probably there was tiny LED somewhere buried deep in red. So only because I closed got close and looked, I could see that something indicated. But really, it fails test for contrast, it fails test for normal human perception. So on the surface, everything is done, check marks, we're accessible, help is available, but really not only nothing happens, but if someone was really waiting for help and spent half an hour, it would be extremely frustrating and it would feel disrespectful.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think a lot of us take for granted that we're those are just the ability to interact and access those types of interactions in stores. We take it for granted, and and those the cases where not everybody can interact the same way is often overlooked. And I think like why this conversation is important is because now with technology, and the vast majority of people having a device in their hands, uh, with a little bit of consideration, it can really change the accessibility story and make the required experiences to have the right store interactions and the right communications with employees much more approachable and accessible for all sorts of situations, whether that's someone who's bound to a wheelchair or has hearing or vision restrictions, or other means of not being able to interact in certain ways, whether that's touch, whether that's voice or eyesight or whatever the case may be. And so, yeah, I would love to dive a little bit deeper into how we can start to use some of the technologies we have available. Nolan, you and your team have done, I think, some work here too that really, I don't know if it was intended, as part of the solution in some of the frontline solutions that you deliver and the experiences you deliver for customers, but it certainly can help address those scenarios. And then, certainly there's more to think about to make sure it's fully well-rounded and complete, but it's an important topic.
And yeah, I mean, I think one thing that Albert said that was interesting was the little LED light that he couldn't see, right? So think about in terms of accessibility as well. Think about like curbside, all of these scenarios where you're trying to get help, and I'm sure there's a higher propensity of curbside for those with some limitations. Absolutely key to Albert's point, making sure that we have that acknowledgement and that we see confidence in the fact that this stuff is working. Go ahead, Albert.
Such a known feature, right? You press a button, or more modern, it's a touchless sensor. You can wave your hand and the door opens. Imagine how many increments or considerations have to be done. So normally, right, there is a door, there is a button. But if you have a button placed directly by the door and you press the button, the door is going to hit you. So they implemented delays. They implemented feedback. The activation mechanics intentionally go slow. Plus, in the ideal setup, the button is placed in a such way that it is still outside of the radius of the door. So it defaults the safety, yet the button has to be visible because it's not directly adjacent. So seemingly just an automatic opener, but how many considerations? And let me tell you, the best teacher is real life, right? So there is no genius could just think through all the concepts. So it's only incremental implementation and then testing and actively listening to the feedback that comes to this real experience.
When we think about accessibility, we've talked a lot about a button. What about using the consumer's mobile device? Is that where things are headed, or is there a nicety here with a QR code or NFC with using a mobile device? What's your accessibility take on QR codes for assistance and action? And then we'll close it there.
QR code helps to open something like a URL quickly. However, you still need to be able to point your phone at it. If you are blind, it becomes a big challenge in itself. How do you know where is the QR code? And there is no law that requires blind people to know Braille, for example, and not everyone knows, especially with technology, because now we have voice recognition, we have talking technology. So another thing, it could be something like a talking Bluetooth point. It's not at the pilot phase. Some museums, especially in Europe, because in Europe the legislations are catching up, but care about accessibility in many ways was ahead. So when you go into a museum, there are interactive points when you approach certain scenes, certain visual, certain painting, you can get a description on your phone. And as always, accessibility makes it better experience for everyone, because someone may just want to stand quiet and listen on their own, and maybe listen even twice. And by the way, right, so we have a representative from the large corporation. Jeffrey, I'm not putting you on the spot, so I'm saying this neutrally. It matters, right, if you have accessibility in the part of your performance goal annually or not. Because if you are judged without that consideration and your team is judged like this, then even if you want to do better, your hands are really tied, you're really constrained. So this is another layer that brings accessibility. And by enabling that, it will enable also the first for new technologies, for new solutions, for partnerships with modern high-tech companies represented by Nolan today. So my approach is this: multiple points of view, just as I started with my stories, that help to see the overall picture. And then sometimes you need just a little bit to tip the balance the right way, or sometimes it could be really, big, huge overhaul that benefits not only people with disabilities, but everyone in the store.
All righty. Well, Jeff, why don't I leave the last word to you, pal? That was great, Albert.
Yeah, I think such an important conversation and so many important considerations for retailers to think about, as you mentioned, both from a experience for their customers and as well as the appropriate training and process for their employees, from frontline employee to the store leadership as well, and how to best accommodate everybody's situation as a customer. And we are certainly here to help make sure that we can provide some of the technologies to those customers, to those retailers rather, on finding ways to achieve some of those goals that you bring to them as recommendations or needs to better serve every customer. So we appreciate the time, Albert.
All righty. Thanks so much, Albert. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Have a great day.